G'day, welcome to the Inforunners. I'm Execute, joined today by Algared and Mr. Morph Power Ranger-ologist. I don't know how else to say it. Has anyone called you a Power Ranger before? I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
There you
That'd
go.
be a
I just
first.
thought of it as I was doing it. I was like, yeah, Mighty Morphin
Yep.
Power Ranger. Yeah. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So we brought Morph along today because it's been a while. We hooked up with him since con, so we thought we'd get back in for a discussion. We've been talking for about an hour and a half before the show started. It's been great catching up with you.
It ranged all over.
Yeah, all over. But what we actually originally brought him from is we wanted to have a discussion about something Algared connected a few dots. And it's I don't even know how I'm going to end up titling this video. It'll be something along the lines of environments, collectibles, and crafting. But Algared, I'll let you kind of take the start on this one where we kind of started. But it's essentially different animals and plants and collecting them and their outcomes. Essentially, I don't know how to word that. Is how would tell us where this started.
It's looking at the fact that at the moment we've got collectibles in game. You can collect the tongue from Animal X and the part B from plants, and get the plants or the fibers or whatever. And the question was, what are we going to use them for? And at the moment, they're very simple. But as we look around the world and as we look around the outposts, we can see that they're using natural resources to make those shoddy outposts. So they're using the trees on all the scrap iron or the material that they're making somehow. So where are they getting that? And that raises the question of, okay, quasi-grazers, you get different varieties of quasi-grazers. What if we get different resources from those quasi-grazers? And that raises a question of, that also goes down the line of why, what do we do? How do we transport them? How do we find them? It gives reasons for things like the Endeavour.
So before you,
so it goes everywhere.
Yeah, before you stem that, so to elaborate on what Algared's essentially talking about was, I came to him with the idea of, we got the quasi-grazer that if you have it in a cold environment, it gets extra fur. If you have it in a desert environment, it essentially is more leathered. And I said to him, does that mean that when I go to collect that animal, I get hair and I get leather from the winter one, or do I get a new type of leather from the desert one, or just more leather? And then he kind of counteracted with one of the questions we'd had from CitizenCon was, why would you have any reason to take, well, like when they talked about these worms, why would I actually want to take them to other places? And that quickly became was, if you've got this rare creature that only appears in this environment, can I take it to another environment and it changes it? And what are and we then very quickly went into cane toads. So I'll ask you this, Morph, do you know anything about cane toads?
No, I don't, unfortunately.
So I'll explain it really quickly, but Algared will give you a much better explanation. Was they had was it an insect, Algared? I think it was an insect, wasn't it?
A cane beetle?
Cane beetle. And it was basically out of control here, and it was destroying all these crops. And basically they found this toad in Africa, and was it
South America?
South America? South America. Sorry, my bad.
I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. So as I said, I told you he'll correct me. And they basically didn't test it thoroughly enough, and they thought they had. And so they released it in Australia in the hopes that it would kill these beetles. It did. It killed the beetles, but it
ignored them. Totally ignored the beetles and ate everything else.
Okay, so I was wrong. Yeah, as he said. And it basically is now just spread across the entirety of Australia, and it kills anything that eats it. So a crocodile, these things are about this big. I'd say about that, Algared, with me, a cane toad. Yeah. If you put them in water, they make the water poisonous. If anything that eats them dies, including crocodiles. So it's got no natural predators at all, right? So when you look at it like that, you can then start to relate that to Star Citizen. Could you have something go utterly, terribly wrong where the entire planet is uninhabitable because this kills everything in the ecosystem? Or does it take a really deadly creature and make it really tame? Does it take cute little possum and make them a killer crazy monkey thing? Like, these are the questions we've got to know. But on top of that, like I said, it now comes full circle back to the crafting. What are the benefits of that? So you could obviously see something deadly might have a really poisonous thing that's really good for crafting, but they're highly deadly. You see, so there's lots of questions in there. And we thought this was an interesting topic to talk about, the outcomes. So, yeah.
I think there's a lot of depth that you're imagining with it, and I really want that to be the case with Star Citizen, though I don't know. But if we were to speculate on it, um, I think that it may be too much to think that the animals that we move around would affect the environment in a super substantial way,
Mm.
probably because they wouldn't want it to do that. I remember there was a really early game that was developed that had a bunch of these parameters that players could affect, and they just completely nuked the environment day one. And it was pretty hilarious how tragic it was. There's a really cool
Yeah.
video on the YouTube. You may know what I'm talking about. It was one of the first
Mm.
uh, MMOs ever made, and it went disastrously bad because of that. So I don't know if it would happen, but it's certainly an interesting idea to think that they may be affected by the environment and yield different
Mm.
different
I think
harvestables.
I think 99% of the time this is all going to fall under science. And I think what one of the things we thought about was if you take the Endeavor with the biopods, we know that because of the way they talk about farming, you can change the environment on this. So if you went to X planet and you were a mad scientist, and you take that creature, you could essentially, like animal cruelty does, you know how they test things on animals, you could essentially put a single animal into that environment and copy the environment of another planet. And I think 99% of the time that animal will die, right? Because it can't survive in that environment. But if it can, they may bring out creatures that is like, okay, here's this cow, but they may have pre-established that there are 5 other versions of this cow, but you have to find them through science.
I would also imagine that if CIG decide, we could take the sandworm, we could put it on a planet, and it survives on that planet, but it doesn't become dominant because CIG's just decide it's not going to become dominant. So in terms of those cases where, which picks up your point more, where we don't control, it's a bit like that. We're only 10% of the population. We can influence the economy, but we can't control the economy. We can influence the planets, but we're not going to control what happens on the planets unless CIG decide, oh, that's a nice story idea. And so I think that it opens that door for them. But there is that option where, as we're trying to breed new animals, it gives that option for that. They could go down that line. One thing that does make me think that's a possibility is when they talked about the Endeavour originally, they talked about it being the controlled environments and needing it for certain seeds or plants to grow. So you'd actually control the environment and then make sure those plants could grow. And whether that meant it was just for transporting a plant from Lear and growing it so you could actually have it in your controlled environment above Hurston and then get the resources, or whether it was converting that plant so it could grow on Hurston, is another thing. But it does raise that possibility, and the animals go down that line as well.
I think it's an interesting topic, because I think in our real world, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of like natural occurring like complex elements are they happen from biological processes and like adhesives and etc. Like a lot of advanced composites. So they use these more complex things that come from animals and living things, and that would be one of the reasons why you would want to take different plants that produce certain really important elements for producing advanced things and then move them to like a specific location, because just logistically speaking, you'd want to protect these things, right? You'd want to covet your production line so as not to be destroyed by other, competitive players who want to have a place in the market. And kind of, so that's kind of like the motivating driving element behind it to kind of set up the conversation.
I just thought of a horrible thought that the Navy built Orison above where the whales are because there was a resource they wanted.
I suspect very much that will actually be maybe a dark part of it, because like the Orison company, they're all like super nice and everything. There's a dark secret they've been harvesting the whales or something. That'd be kind of funny and dark. I wouldn't put it past them. I wouldn't put it past them.
You're muted, I think, X.
am muted because I was playing with getting a lozenge. Thank you for reminding me. I'm thinking of an old. It was on Netflix, right? And I watched this documentary, and I'm sure someone will find it. But it had this episode of it was kind of like a what if on certain environments in space, and they had this one with it was these two type there were four-arm, it was a four-arm monkey type of thing. A long story short, there was also a plant, and it turns out the plant was the one that was um causing this fight to happen between these two species of monkeys. And what it led me to think of when I was thinking of that was you can sometimes have a placid animal, right? So, for example, it might be a herbivore, but all of a sudden you put it in a different environment and it would be could become a carnivore as well. But also, plants could also affect the animals, not just the environment. So I've just realized there's another factor. It's not just putting, go from a cold environment to a hot environment. It's also their food sources. I've just realized. So that could be a really cool outcome as well. So it's, you see where the science has just gone, right? It's just gone from, all right, we're putting this monkey in different environments. Now I'm putting it am I giving it bananas or apples, and in different environment. So it actually makes it a really complex process. So doing science on the Endeavour is going to be a big thing. But I think, like, I know, Algared, you know more about the law stuff than me, but there's a lot of certain protected creatures and stuff, yeah? So
Well, there's
that'll
the
come into it. This is unlawful science, is essentially what I'm trying to say.
yeah. So there's the Ausonians from the planet Osso, and harvesting their hides is illegal because they're a sentient species. People want the hide because they're a species that basically communicate by their skin changing colour. So it's considered great for using in camouflage applications and things like that. So there's a black market trade in Osso skins. So if you're trading that, you're trading in the pelts of,
and kind of like how
beings.
Morph mentioned with the space whales. I was going to call it space whales. You could see a military aspect for the skins Algared's talking about, like camo and stuff like that. So
yeah.
So yeah, it's food for thought. Like, because I just want to see where this goes. Like, it adds to the crafting element. Because most games, like, you go out and it's like I swing my axe and I hit the rock 5 times and I am guaranteed. What's the most you get? Like, it's a variable between 1 and 5 of that element. But this, you could actually hedge your bets. Like, okay, I'm really after more leather from this quasi grazer, so I'm going to go to that Pacific species to get even more leather because that's what I'm after. You see what I mean? So it becomes a knowledge game, which we know leans into what Star Citizen is trying to do. It's trying to be knowledge based and skill based. I think that beats a lot of credence.
And we do see that element of the idea of breeding animals for characteristics in pretty much every thing we do at the moment. We see it in breeding cattle, we see it in breeding dogs, we see it in pigeon flies, people who breed budgerigars, finches, you name it. We see people looking at a characteristic and saying, yeah, I want to highlight that characteristic. Or with dogs, we literally have picked dogs that are timid, and we attempt to breed that timidity into a dog. And if we're after a guard dog, we're getting that more aggressive behaviour, and we breed animals that have got the characteristics we're seeking. So,
I mean, I think you guys have really opened a can of worms with this topic. Like, you talk about going wildly out into like some pretty intense territory. But if you really think about it, if they want to do any kind of system where players are able to cultivate harvestables and to cultivate living animals and like breed them to produce more, there will need to be some development into how that works, right? Like, will they breed? And if they breed, what attributes do they have? Can you breed different species? Like that, they're gonna have to answer these questions. I'm not entirely sure they've ever asked themselves internally, like, what are we gonna do when we get to this point? Because it is a big thing to do, right?
I've just thought of one. One of the creatures I was thinking about making for this thumbnail was the Yeti. Algared, talk about how that thing was made. The one on Micro.
Boreal Stalker.
Sorry?
So no, I'm sorry. It's
What'd
just
you
a
say
stupid-
about breeding NPCs? What? Say that
Just
again.
put an NPC in the room with the Yeti and see if they breathe. Get a human Yeti
Mad
hybrid.
scientist. Yeah.
That's where the red shirts go.
Now we know where the haircut comes from, Morph.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Mad
so
scientist.
the arboreal stalker, I always laugh at. People see Microtech as being a nice, warm, fuzzy company, a bit like Crusader, and yet they had the Rayori stalker created as an apex predator on their planet.
They built it.
Why?
So can we take this a step further? We now know that there's a built creature. Can that be a part of the science? You can literally, well, if it's built, was it cut by DNA? Like, did they build it? Like, is that a part of science? Can I take a creature like a horse, because for transportation, and on this planet they're on, there is no really good transportation animal, and for some reason vehicles won't work there because of, I don't know, makeup reason, electronic interference. So can I breed a horse with a creature from there? And I don't mean breed, I mean DNA lock. See what I'm saying? So again, if much like how you scan for something, can you essentially look at different tributes of different animals and find ways through the science to connect them, not just breeding?
The horse is a good example in human history. The Clydesdale was not a naturally occurring horse. It was one that was bred looking for those characteristics that could actually enable it to haul more. And so you got this massive horse which can haul large amounts of stuff, but it's not, you don't see that horse naturally. It's one that's actually, the characteristics were actually picked for and bred looking for that. So is that what's happened with Rayari doing population of planets? Certainly Microtech. If I remember the lore, the seeding process failed on Microtech, and so they had to reseed it, and so they created animals and plants. And Microtech often say, look, we did it because we can. That's almost the approach it seems they take. I tend to think Microtech are quite dark in their
they're Apple. Didn't you know that? They're just Apple. That's what they are.
So everyone, and I take umbrage because everyone always says that Hurston are the evil bastards because they're
just honest about
work contracts. They're just honest about it. They say you signed our contract. Whereas everyone else kind of hides and pretends they're nice, but they're really as dark and horrible.
So I'm going like the next step in my mind here, and I'm going, so you could have legal ways of doing this and illegal ways. So like you could breed legally, but cutting DNA could be considered illegal. But then also in different systems, there would be different laws. So Pyro would be a lot more lax. They just wouldn't give a shit. Right? So with this mad scientist stuff, you might have to collect some of the animals and breed animal A and breed animal B separately. So then in a non-legal system, so then you can also do testing between the two.
And then you need to smuggle it into the legal system because it's not going to get through the legal gate. So you're going to need a transient.
But once it's there, you could actually use this as like a biological weapon. You could actually essentially, I don't know, you make a bat that comes in and bites people and they bleed to death. Or whatever. You get where I'm going? It's like you got to see, can we create diseases? I'm opening another can of worms, Morph. But you get where I'm going with, right?
So much chaos introduced into Star Citizen. Dear God. But it's an interesting thought experiment. I feel like it may, knowing the internet, what people would do, that would go back. I think the entire population would be dead in a week.
It's what you said earlier. Some people just like lighting a match and throwing it in to see what happens.
Yeah, want to watch the world burn.
And I could see that. That's why like the question about why would people take sandworms? How did the sandworms get on other planets? And the law question answer was people put them there because what reason they put them there is lost in time, but people transported the worms to the planets and they adapted and changed and became apex predators.
I suspect they will be taking the lore of Dune and kind of adapting that with the word. I don't know if how familiar you guys are with the original Dune books, but they're like later in the series they kind of explain a bit more about what the sandworms are and what they do. And I don't think I'm spoiling too much here, but they do affect like the environment of a planet, and the reason why Arrakis is so dry is because of the sandworms and their absorption of moisture. They use it for breeding, and so they completely basically keep the water level super low. So it like destroyed the ecosystem of the original planet of Arrakis, which was actually very green.
Yeah.
So like that'd be an interesting way of having animals affect different planets. Is like you put
Full
down the
circle.
sand,
You just
destroy the environment eventually.
yeah. Well, you've just described it full circle. The environment affects the animals and the plants, and eventually that comes back. It's like a balanced ecosystem. You just explained real life.
Mhm.
So you could actually look, and I'm going to just check this out. There was a really extreme example. Is there a creature you could release on Microtech that would eventually fix the errors of the transformation? What would you call it? What do they call it? It went wrong
Well,
on
they had
Microtech.
the terraforming glitch.
It'd fix the terraforming.
It'd be interesting. I
Hmm.
think that these are really big scope effects, but if I were to say like, and that makes me feel like that we're likely not to get them, but if we could just get something more simple, like for example, if there was a planet that that doesn't have life natively, but has, you know, maybe some of the building blocks required for life,
Hmm.
and you could set up like a base there and start growing there because you introduce moisture and some ingredients to make the plants grow. That's kind of interesting. Like you could terraform your little area, so you'd be
Yep.
flying over a planet, you see a little oasis that somebody made of like plants that they're growing to
Mm.
kind of reap the rewards of those benefits to be able to manufacture things. I think that would be a very cool way of doing some like minor form of terraforming that players can have some agency over to affect like this local environmental area. And
think-
maybe to some extent they can tie it into the way that they generate planets, because I understand that there's a lot of different systems for them to be able to automate the way planets are generated in order to make their jobs a lot easier. They don't like hand place plants.
They can
If that system
also
will be responsive to like if you plant something there, it gets added into that library by a
yeah.
percentage. They eventually start to spread using the existing tech. Maybe that's something that would
Yeah.
be possible for them to do.
So there's precedence here, right? So there's a couple of things. Like we know they want to do in-game events, right? They're already saying that they're going to start to do some of those with Pyro this year. We know we have exploration, so as things gets discovered, if you think about it, you could literally have a creature that gets discovered on a new planet, but then what happens when that creature had science things done to it? I think so the third part I'm going to cut to that and then come back. But the third part is we don't know enough about how science is going to work. Right? So all the things that are entailed, how research. Yeah.
The other thing I want to chuck in is
Go ahead.
based on what Morph was saying in terms of that small area where we could terraform and have that influence. We also know they've talked about those shield hubs.
Yes.
So
Right,
you get the shield hub and you've got shield covering your.
Well, essentially, isn't that just
your
a
zone, then
isn't that just a biodome on the planet? So take
Yeah,
the pot off the
it
Endeavor.
kind of creates, that's what I'm saying. So you could possibly create that shield could possibly help,
absolutely
right,
make a different
give you that air
environment.
shield, changes the environment a little bit, so you can actually do that type of stuff. They could go down that line. Will they go down that line? Probably not.
Yeah.
But it would be cool.
Terraforming as an event, I could see, but us actual terraforming, probably not. It's a bit too complicated.
Probably not. Probably not.
But
Probably just gonna be like planters, like No Man's Sky, where you have a planter and you put what plants you want in it, and it's like sealed and controlled. That's probably the most likely outcome.
But if if we're all mining the shit out of a planet, they could literally come along and go, right, so this has happened because you mined it too much, right? That's the type of events. Yeah. Right. So going back to what kind of with the second step, I knew I was going to forget what I was going to talk about, and I've now forgotten. That's why I didn't remember. Anyway, it's fine. It'll come back to me in a minute. Yeah.
But it's like with Hurston, right? Hurston has environmental problems because they're strip mined it, and so the question is Hurston, the plants on Hurston going to die? Are they going to need to reseed it? What are the animals on Hurston going to be like? How are they going to cope with the effect of the pollution and the strip mining? How does it change the way the animals, plains animals, work when you've got these massive pits everywhere with all rubbish? So there are not only questions for the future, but also questions for the planets we've got now. How's it going to work out in the long term?
Yeah, I think the environments, the creatures, and the plants and all that stuff is just as important as the ships and things that we do. And I think like the other day I was looking at the number of creatures on the Galactopedia. I think there was 16 creatures. That is hardly any. Like we haven't even scratched the surface of this, right? We know that they've got different environments. Like one of the things I was really happy about when was when I looked at Terra, they have a lava moon. Right, so that means they're going to have to build a lava tile set. Something I've been really personally looking forward to. Yeah, I'm a bit evil though.
Weren't they? I thought there was originally flowing lava and pyro at one point, but maybe I'm.
And again, that may come back that they put onto the planets. This is what I'm trying to get at. Like everything, me and Algared talked about jungles for so many years, like them using those Crytek level jungles, and then we it kind of went beyond what me and Algared had kind of imagined, because they showed all these different, like the same planet but like tropical and all that, and then the first question me and Algared kind of had was, when are they going to do alien trees? You know what I mean? So like this is just trees that we know. Are we going to have plants that we don't know? Are we going to have carnivorous plants? You see where I'm going with this, right? So this is just the shit that we know. What happens when they're actually going out into creatures we know, creatures that we don't know? They've done that with the creatures, but they haven't done it with the plants. So that's the next step. Like,
I get the feeling that the plants that they've shown us are the plants that we see on the terraformed worlds.
Yeah,
the world that we're, and so that makes sense that they look more human, and by that I mean they look more like what we're used to seeing on Earth.
Yeah,
but when you go beyond that, when you go to Vishian planets or the Banu planets or a planet that
Pyro has it already. Like there's that. It's rare, but if you look, there's
the yellow stuff?
planets on or plants on in the Pyro system, or at least there were supposed to be originally. They showed them in the in the concept art, and that's not from humans. It's a completely different kind of
what's that?
It's an alien species.
You know the planet that's yellow? It's got that moss on it. That's technically a plant.
I mean, that's more human, but I think that's more what we're familiar with. I think with Algared, if I'm not mistaken, you're curious about like Xeno.
Yeah, I'm interested in what are the plants like on the Xi'an planets, or the Banu planets.
That's going to terraform. That's going to fall under science too. Finding these alien plants and how they interact as well. So
I think what we're scratching at here is actually is a pretty useful and interesting topic, because it's not been often discussed by CIG or at all. Really, is what does science mean? What does discovery mean? And I think one of the vehicles of discovery and science would be plant life and animal life, discovering new plants and animals, and then some kind of deeper level system of going beyond just discovering them, but using their harvestables to combine them with other things to create, better statistics on something that you craft, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe there's an archetypal type of thing that a living creature produces, and this one creature produces it in high quality and produces the best weapon or something, right? And then it becomes really coveted. You discovered this really important creature on this planet, and you spread the news. I think that's where
it's a weird game balancing tool too, in a way, because you could actually introduce so say there's a material that's just really abundant on this place, and this place is just the one place to get it. But then they introduce another animal that's either the same that allows them to make the same material or an even better material. You see where I'm going? Right, exactly. So they can use it as a balancing mechanic.
And we see the same. Go on, Morph.
Go ahead, Algared.
I was going to say, we see the same type of thing in the exploration of places like the Amazon, where explorers will go in and they'll find, medicine or, types of the plant material or animal parts that will actually result in medicines that we have.
He's talking about the movie Arachnophobia. I've seen it.
No, I'm not talking Arachnophobia. That's Skip. That's one of the horrible ones with big, sharp, pointy teeth. But it's that type of exploration, going into a place that's totally unknown, and finding the, classifying the animal and finding the collectibles of those animals, and giving them an application, whether it's in medicine or food or building or otherwise.
It is one of the professions that are not very touched on. We got two, the Sen and the Endeavor. That's it. We got no,
and because they've never concepted it publicly for us, they've never described for us exactly any of this is going to mean. So I think that's why there are so few ships. But I mean, this is where I think it becomes this discussion we've started here is where that loop I think makes a lot of sense.
I think they've done this. You think they've had this discussion? I think this is all after 1.0, but I think someone has. I think
somebody might have said it once, but like I don't think it's been heavily discussed or spitballed or actually written down somewhere.
I reckon they have. So, they wrote a lot of stuff over the years, and those really early documents they talked about things that they went public with. They haven't changed a lot. They have changed, but not a lot. You know, like Death of a Spaceman. How repair is going to work. You can still see how repair ties in with base building and all that type of thing. But you're right. They've never actually actively came out and told us what science actively is. That's really interesting. Because like I start to think now, like what areas of science? So obviously you've got the exploration one, but also you've got like medical and military basis. Like what are the different fields of science? That's something I'd like to hear from them.
Well, they did kind of talk about science when they did the Endeavour. And they did the biodomes.
Probably the most we've had, yeah.
And that's about the only time I can actually recall them talking about, you know, growing plants in the controlled environments and adjusting the environment to get the optimal growing conditions for that plant. But that's probably the closest we've got to that science aspect of using this massive science ship.
We did talk about that. We did talk about that when Morph was on last time, because the last few discussions we've had with Morph have been around about AI. Remember when we talked about herds and different kind of like more boss-like creatures as well? Like that all comes into it. Like they're going to have that in the AI. Like even if that plant or that animal is not there, how will that creature be affected when it's eventually connected to it on the other side?
I just realised that animals are basically just NPCs.
They are.
Right?
Yeah.
So that means you can give...
That's why a plant is easier, because a plant doesn't move, but you have to have animations and thinking logic for a creature. Yeah.
But if they're basically NPCs, that means you've got the NPC characteristics.
Yes.
So you can have the characteristics set on Lawville or in Hurston for the vehicle. The animal has these characteristics. You take it to Microtech, and it suddenly becomes it's more aggressive or it's more and so you just click the buttons.
It's like I've taught you, Algared. Like you're learning that they use their different systems in different places. You're a genius.
I know. It's just, but sometimes you just have to stew over the thoughts.
No, it's good. It's good that you're learning on your own. No, I'm not mocking you. I'm actually saying I've picked up on it myself. But you're 100% correct. They can take that system and reuse it on the animals.
No, I don't think they can. I think
they will. They will. Sorry, yes. Well, I say can because we're not definite on what they're going to do.
Yeah.
But what Morph is also picking up on is that he is right to be skeptical on how far they've planned this out. But again, most games, 5 years, Morph? You think at this point that they haven't written things down and they're 15 years in? One of the things I learned. You must have learned at CitizenCon. There's a lot that they talked about that they just can't do. They weren't able to do. There was a lot of frustrated developers because they didn't have the tools they needed to work on stuff. So what are they doing if they can't work on it? They're planning.
I also remember the time when Chris was talking about the People to Planet video, and he said and my memory is when they showed him, he said, "This is what I hope would be able to get in 5 years," and it was like, we can now do it now. And it was like, pivot.
Yeah.
And so I think if the tech is there, when the tech's there, they apply the tech. The question is, how far does the tech allow them to go?
And how far do they want to take it? Do they want to have some kind of weird spider that can, it's not a spider on one planet, then it's a spider on another. It just allows them a creative outlet. And I think that's the interesting thing. They want to have this, like, think of all the usual sci-fi tropes, right? We've seen those already in other things. Now you take all that to your regular TV shows that you've watched of sci-fi, and how many times, like, how many times have I mentioned this one particular scene, Algared? Lost in Space, where they're on the ship with all the spiders. You remember that? I've mentioned it like so many times. But now think about those spiders. How did they come to be? Who made them? Were they just totally placid? And then they got put somewhere, and then they developed
the
progenitors
those. Made them. You
get where I'm going, right? My point is, like, they can make anything they wish to make. It's just how far they want to take it. And again, every time they use it one place, they can use it somewhere else. So you can see straight away by using this breeding thing, it gives them a lot of outcomes. But like for example, if they have the spider though, when it spins webs, they can only ever use that on other spiders, right? So again, if you can make a tool that is duplicatable, reusable, and you get more out of it, you've heard them talk about this before, both of you. How much do they get for the least amount of work? You're getting a lot of work by building that breeding tool.
And we kind of see the element of that because they've talked about, young critters, middle-aged critters, older critters. So the critters are aging, or hopefully they're aging over time.
I've just realized there's a credence to this as well. They talked about you could change your race by breeding with different NP. Like so you could start out as a Terran and breed with an Earther, and eventually it would swap over. You could actually change your melanin and all those different attributes. They mentioned that, Algared. So also it's taking the character profile system and putting that into animals. So there is a credence for a tool.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. So it's taking the tool. Oh, okay. I know we opened a can of worms.
So the tools are there, or possibly there.
Yeah. There's enough there to be, as we always say, enough rope to hang ourselves.
And we've probably hung ourselves, but that's okay.
I think we've hung ourselves over and over again.
We've hung, drawn, and quartered ourselves, but
yeah, all of it.
Yeah.
I'm looking for this topic made me think of a really interesting book I had read, and I'm looking for it because I've got it in my I know I've got it in my library, but I can't find it. But it was a science fiction book talking about humans traveling to another planet that has life, and then discovering that life is based on a completely different biological structure than DNA. And that the implications of that is that these two life forms, like all life on planet Earth, is derived from like a single like structure of DNA that diverged and split and created different types of creatures, right? Like the code of humanity, the code of life on planet Earth is unique to planet Earth. And this planet explores what would happen if you encountered life that had actually started completely differently in a different planet, and how would it interact with ours. And initially it was really fascinating. These two life forms couldn't interact at all. Like creatures that would they would just kind of ignore you because they didn't know what to do with you, because you were just too different than what they were used to, and they couldn't process. If they tried to eat you, they wouldn't be able to process you as food because it's a completely different structure than they're used to. But eventually they did adapt, and it became pretty terrifying how they were able to do it. And I wish I could remember that book. It was really interesting. But it does pose the question of whether or not alien xeno creatures or xeno plants would even be able to be grown or compatible with crossbreeding with anything that humans have. They'd have to explore a lot of interesting questions about exploration and space travel.
So really like the old carbon-based versus silicon-based life forms.
So really quickly, while Morph was talking, I actually went and found that episode. It's on Netflix. It's called Alien Worlds, because you were talking about your book. So it's this episode here called Eden. If you want to know what I was talking about,
I've watched that.
Yeah. So do you know the one I'm talking about with the kind of like the two little monkey creatures, and then the plant turns out to be the guy that's like making them do all this weird shit? It's a really interesting sci-fi episode. Really good series if you like that. So I know you've seen it, Morph. So yeah, it's worth watching. But if you remember that book, or you know the book that Morph is talking about, maybe post it in the comments below. Or if Morph does actually discover it, I'll put it as a pinned comment below. While we're on that, Morph, what would you like to hear from people in the comments below? Besides,
what would I like?
Yeah, like about this episode. Like what would you like to hear from people in regards to what we've discussed today?
Well, I'm just like interested to know what people feel like science could be, because we've got a lot of professions that revolve around combat. But I kind of like, and I love combat. Like, don't get me wrong. My favorite thing to do is FPS combat and then ship combat. But I also think it's interesting to have non-combat professions, and science is one of those that they've not well explored or talked about. And I'd be interested to know what people kind of envision, or what kind of gameplay they would enjoy around science. Because when you say science is a gameplay loop, it's sort of nebulous. It's hard to pin down exactly what that could mean. We've kind of spitballed some ideas here about what it could mean, but it could mean some other things that we didn't think of. And I'd be interested to see what ideas people have, because they've got to talk about it eventually, and they've got to give us an idea of what it is. Maybe it'll get their creative juices flowing and help them think of some cool ideas. I know they listen to the community and they read through comments occasionally. Maybe if something cool comes up, I mean, I want to play a cool game. So whatever cool ideas people have, I want to know them, because I hope that CIG can do it.
I know Algared would agree with me on this. One of the things me and Algared have noticed is almost every profession somehow touches another profession. So that's essentially what you described. In a way, you were saying, I'm an FPS shooter ship player. How is science going to affect me? Just like how medical is interacted with. Yeah, but you'd agree with that, Algared. And what would you like to? What would you like to hear in the comments below as well?
That was one of the things that I think actually started our discussion as well, in terms of where does we know that the professions we've seen so far kind of interact. How does science interact with the collectibles and the other stuff? How does that impact medical? How does it impact combat? How does it impact construction? Where do we get the resource from? Does breeding animals help us get higher quality resources too, or higher quality mats and that type of stuff? So so all of those types of things were kind of where we mulled and wondered. So my question is, what do you hope, or what do you think science could be? What applications do you hope science will be? And I think we've tried to touch on some.
Yeah. This discussion did not go where I thought it would go. I didn't think it would lead into science. I thought it was just something that I'd picked up on that was like, now it has brought up more questions than answers. As these do.
If you're talking about breeding animals and plants, what we're really talking about is some kind of profession, and where would that fall under? It would fall under probably science, right?
Yeah.
So, so we're really talking about science gameplay, really. I mean, that's kind of what the topic has become, and I think it's an interesting one, because again, it's not one they've explored. They've got only a few ships that do it. So I'd be interested to see more about that, because and I think it also ties, like we said, into exploration. And exploration is yet another thing that's a big question mark, because we've only got, if they end up only having 5-star systems, or like even 100-star systems, there's like a limited amount of places to go. So it surely can't just be like, I found a cool view and that's my exploration gameplay. There's got to be something deeper and more interesting, and that's an actual loop. It feels like science is connected with that, right? Like other games do this. No Man's Sky connects science with exploration, and so does what was the other?
Algared, I'm getting flashbacks to the Odyssey's room on the back where they sold it for the view. After he made that comment, I just went, "Oh, Odyssey." Sorry,
but
PTSD's more.
I get the idea of that science gameplay. One of the things I've often said, in terms of me, is going to a planet and just helping a settlement become prosperous. But one of the things I say old man Hurston wants to do is actually be a farmer. He wants to be the bread, turn Hurston into the bread basket for Stanton. So he wants to breed cattle and herd cattle on the plains.
Turn the planet around, basically.
Yeah. You know, he's. The Hurstons have the view, we've got to get what we can while we can, because things are going to change. I see old man Hurston being more, but there's a lot more money that we can make long term.
I think that's the thing I'm learning from today's episode with science in general. It's going to need all the other gameplays in before it can come in, because
there's a lot of,
all of them.
When we talk about science, it's like intrinsically complex, and there's a lot of detail that needs to be there, because science is about like research and finding like minute details and differences between different species. So there's going to have to be a lot of thinking and like process building and tool building in CIG's part to be able to create a system that's interesting. That you can call science,
And I think it requires planning, like I said. I think they have plans, and I think maybe they could be vague, but I think that they again, you start to connect all the dots of all the different systems that they're building, and you can start to see that this is going to be a major profession. Much like any of the other professions, you can see how it ties into a lot, like the ones we've mentioned today, from cooking to medical to military, and everything in between. And you can be a man, you can do it lawfully and unlawfully as well. So you can just see how it already ties into all the different systems.
And science here is a form of exploration, and that's one of the things that, you know, when they did the survey years ago, 70% wanted to be like Star Trek, be the explorers in the universe, finding,
it's a part of it.
You know, so finding new life, finding, you know.
I would say exploring and STEM are in the same vein, or they're both STEMs, exploring and science. So I can see that. Did you ask a comment, by the way, or not? I can't remember for you.
No,
actually.
I did.
All right.
Where do people want?
Yeah. So I'm going to
see science going.
My comment's going to be a bit different. I've just since the start of the episode, I can't get it out of my mind. I want to know what color Power Ranger you think Morphologist would be if he was a Power Ranger. Which Power one would he be? And let me know in the comments, because I'm sure Morph's going to read them and hate me for it. But anyway, that's what I'd like to know. No, I'd also like to know, just, has this been an interesting episode? Has it opened your mind? That's why we do these episodes. Just to, you know, we do these to make you guys think outside the box, and think about future gameplay. And does that actually sound appealing to you? Not just the breeding, but like how far can science go? And I think the other thing is we've only hit one side of science. I think there will be other parts to it, but like real life, science is made up of multiple objects and things within our real world. So how do you ground that in a sci-fi game? And I think they've started out like the forests and jungles. They've started out with what we know before they go to Crazy Town. And I think we will, fingers crossed, get to Crazy Town. And I think when you start to think of this kind of what I was hearing when Morph was asking his question is, remember, you have to try and limit that in a gameplay way. Now, they can do anything they want, but by taking a tool and reusing it. So I guess my question is, can you think of any other tools that they already have, like the ones Algared mentioned with the breeding and the character profiles and the AI profiles? Is there any other tools that could come in here that they could reuse? I think is my question.
Or like planet tech, like I mentioned earlier.
Exactly.
For populating a planet's surface with different foliage and fauna and flora, right? Because they've got that as part of their planet tech system to automate this.
Absolutely.
Like, how could it inform that? And could it influence it in any way? It'd be interesting.
Yep. Because I reckon at some point we'll actually get a planet. What's that world, Algared? No, like he's the law guy here.
No, probably not.
There's I'll put you on the spot. There's that planet that is like our moon. It's locked to the sun. So one side of it is extremely, extremely hot, and the other side is extremely, extremely cold. And the city's on the band.
There was a book about that I really enjoyed.
Paul would know it off the top of a hat.
Yeah, but can you imagine the creatures on one side to the other? You see what I mean? Like, you could actually have creatures that maybe just live outside the city on either side.
The two will meet.
Exactly. Yeah. But what if they do meet?
The people in the middle are in big trouble.
They breed. Yeah, they breed and create whatever they make. So you can see how this allows them to make events. So I don't know. We're going in circles here, but I guess I wanted to raise these questions because I always love these thought experiments, and they make me dream of a better game. And I think it's really important to do that. And one of the things you'll say and agree with me on, Algared, there are thoughts experiments now that we've thought on that we've seen come to pass, like on how the environments have worked and stuff like that, and ships and things like that. So though a lot of people see this as speculation, which it is healthy speculation that it just allows you to explore. And I agree with that. We're not saying that this is exactly what's going to happen, obviously, but it does have really good questions, though. I'll put that to you, Morph. I think you kind of agreed with us on that, yeah? That it does give you some good thoughts to actually think about what could be in the game.
Yeah, I think so. It's, it's probably a bit far off right now considering their current focus, but
absolutely.
It's got to be talked about at some point. And let's just say that Star Citizen isn't a new game. It's not just started. So, I mean, they probably should start talking about it at some point if they're talking about the vision of Star Citizen, right? They've laid out their plans for 1.0, but science isn't really part of it. So, yeah, we'll have to see what they think and what they say.
Yeah, who knows? They might watch this and go, good idea, bad idea,
Yoink.
good idea.
Morphologist. I know most people won't need to know this, but where can people find you on the interwebs?
You can find me on YouTube primarily is where I post a lot of my content, but I'm also on Twitch. You can also find me posting occasionally things on Twitter and chatting with people. But yeah, that's it.
And your address is?
And sorry, my address, no. My credit card information, the social security number are no.
Yeah, I was gonna say congrats on the I can see your YouTube play button there. You got Pride and Joy behind you. Good on you.
Like Pride and Joy, right there.
Nice and done. All right, with that, then we'll kind of wrap it up there. Don't forget to like, subscribe, ring that notification bell, and thank everyone that went the extra mile on Patreon at the end of the video. It's been an absolute pleasure having you, Morph. We really do need to get you back here more often because I really, you have a brain built for this stuff. Believe it or not, like the insight that you come out with, and it definitely pulls me especially back to ground because I get up in the stars and stuff. So it's good to have someone that can ground me. Right. With that then, he's been Morphologist, he's been Algared.
He's been Execute, and we're out of here. Take care.
See you, citizens. Say bye, Morph.
Yeah.